Wounded alien girl collapsed with 2 infants. The human just said, "You've got my eyes." Mark Kodiak. Kovach's last functional comm unit had chirped a warning just moments before the blast wave hit, scorching the desert glass landscape. Now the sand, hot as a griddle, vibrated with the thudding approach of something large, too large. His wreck, a glorified cargo hauler named the Iron Bell, was a smoldering ruin, its cockpit a twisted coffin. He was a wreck survivor, lucky to have even crawled free. His ribs protested every shallow breath. Then he saw her, a flash of bioluminescent movement against the red-brown dunes. Not native fauna. She was humanoid, and she was fast. Too fast, maybe. She tumbled, a blur of iridescent scales, and then she was down, a cry tearing from her throat that sounded more animal than anything he'd ever heard. His blood ran cold, not just from the wind whipping off the magnetic-charged dunes, but from the sight of the 2 small forms clutched to her chest. Infants, 2 squirming, whimpering bundles, their small, scaled heads pressed against her. He saw the wound then, a gaping maw on her side bleeding a viscous, shimmering liquid onto the desert floor. Xeno-mercenaries. They always left a mess. "Shit," he rasped, the word a dry, dusty cough. He limped forward, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, to hide in the wreckage of his ship. But the sight of the infants, those tiny, vulnerable things, nailed him to the spot. Her eyes, luminous and multifaceted, snapped open, fixing on him. They were the startling, deep sapphire blue of a human ocean, a color he hadn't seen since leaving Earth. A jolt, like static discharge, went through him. His own eyes, the ones he saw in the cracked mirror of his ship, were the exact same shade. He stared, transfixed, the danger of the incoming enemy fading for a moment. Her pupils were vertical slits, but the color— "You've got my eyes," he blurted, the words out before he could think, absurd in the face of her agony and the encroaching threat. Her lips, thin and dark, pulled back in a snarl, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. No, not a snarl. A grimace of pain. One of the infants wailed, its small fists flailing against her chest. He was just a smart-ass scavenger, sure, but he wasn't a monster. The sand pulsed harder. The mercs were close. He could already hear the low hum of their repulsor lifts. They'd spotted him. God damn it. He was a survivor, not a goddamn hero, but he was already here. All right, he muttered, glancing wildly around. No cover, just flat, unforgiving desert. We gotta move now. He knelt, ignoring the protest of his ribs, and reached for her. She flinched, a low growl rumbling in her throat, a predatory sound that belied her injured state. He caught the scent then, a strange, intoxicating mix of ozone and something sweet. Primal. It filled his lungs, made his head swim. The mercs would be on them in minutes. "Look, lady," he said, his voice rough but urgent. "They're coming. We stay here, we're dead. All of us." He gestured to the infants. She looked at him, her beautiful, out-of-this-world eyes blazing with a mix of fury and desperation. Her type, exiled enforcer, probably valued dominance above empathy, loyalty above logic, and she was wounded. He needed to get through to her. He extended a hand, palm up, a gesture of peace and vulnerability. "Help me help you, or don't. Doesn't matter to me once I'm gone. But you'll be dead too. A risky gamble." She stared at his hand, then at the horizon, her multifaceted eyes scanning for their pursuers. The hum grew louder. She made a guttural sound, something like a command, but he couldn't decipher it. Then, with a grunt of pain, she pushed herself up, using the last of her strength. Her grip, when she finally took his hand, was surprisingly strong, her claws just brushing his skin. He hauled her up, the weight of her and the 2 infants a sudden heavy burden. He tasted blood in his mouth. He stumbled, but kept his feet. Her weight pressed against him, a surprising mix of lithe strength and desperate vulnerability. Her scales, smooth and cool where they touched his arm, shimmered in the harsh light of the twin suns. He could feel the slight tremor in her, a testament to her injury. Okay, easy," he grunted, half carrying her, half dragging her towards a cluster of jagged magnetic rock formations in the distance. Not ideal cover, but better than nothing. The Iron Bell had crashed near ancient magnetic desert relics, a place long abandoned, but now serving as their only hope. "What the hell did you get into?" he whispered, mostly to himself. Her growl was a low, vibrato rumble. "No questions, only escape." Her voice was guttural, the words clipped and accented but understandable. He could feel the heat radiating from her now, beyond what her exertion and the desert sun would account for. It was a strange warmth, almost electric. His mind felt fuzzy, the ozone scent growing stronger, sweeter, more insistent. "Escape where?" he challenged, pushing past a particularly sharp rock. "There's nothing out here but sand and whatever those things are coming for you." He glanced back. A shimmering distortion in the air, barely visible against the dunes, was resolving into the distinct, predatory shapes of multiple speeder bikes. Xeno-mercenaries. Fast. Deadly. "They hunt my claim," she hissed, her voice laced with venom. He didn't understand her meaning, her cultural value claiming sondo, bonding, saningo, survival, but he hadn't yet grasped the full implications. His own ribs felt like they were trying to tear free of his chest cavity. "Your claim? What, you stole their lunch money?" He tried a joke, but it fell flat. She didn't even register it. Her eyes were focused on the rock formations. "We must find shelter." Her hand, still gripping his arm, tightened painfully. He winced. "Yeah, no shit, Sherlock." He scanned the rocks. A narrow fissure, barely visible, promised some kind of respite. He pushed her towards it, the infants still clutched to her, their soft cries a constant, heart-wrenching sound. He felt a weird surge of protectiveness, alien to his usual jaded self. The smell of her intensified, wrapping around him, a heady, disorienting cloud. He felt a strange lightness in his head, a buzzing behind his eyes. Was this part of her physiology? Her heat? It was making him feel strange. His body felt warm, almost flushed. He cursed under his breath. He needed to focus. The lead speeder bike peeled off, making a wide arc, its sonic cannon charging. A high-pitched whine began to build. "Move!" he yelled, shoving her forward with a burst of adrenaline. They scrambled into the fissure just as the sonic blast slammed into the rocks, sending vibrations through the ground that rattled his teeth. Dust and fine sand rained down on them. The space was cramped, barely wide enough for them both, but it was cover. His back scraped against the rough stone. The alien woman sagged against him, her breathing ragged. Her side wound was still seeping, the bioluminescent fluid a stark contrast against her darker scales. "God damn it!" he swore, pressing himself against the rock wall. Close call. He could hear the mercenaries outside, their guttural shouts echoing in the narrow space. They knew they were here. It was only a matter of time before they found a way in. He glanced down at her. Her face was pale, even for her species. The infants whimpered, pressing against her. He felt a pang in his chest. "Are you okay?" he asked, a surprising gentleness in his voice. She looked up at him, her multifaceted eyes wide. "No, I am wounded and hunted." She then added, her voice oddly soft, "But I am not weak." He almost smiled. "Never said you were." He reached out, his fingers brushing her forehead, pushing back a stray tendril of her dark, thick hair. Her skin was warm, unnaturally so. The scent, previously intoxicating, was now almost overwhelming. It was pulling at something deep inside him, a primal hum. This was not just a fight for survival, it was something else entirely. The air in the fissure grew heavy, thick with the alien woman's unique scent. It was potent, cloying, yet deeply alluring, wrapping around him like a physical presence. His head felt light, a constant hum vibrating behind his eyes, making it hard to focus on the immediate danger. "They'll blast this place open," he stated, his voice rough. "Or they'll come in after us. Either way, we're cornered." He shifted, trying to find a more comfortable position, but the space was too tight. Her hip pressed against his, the warmth radiating from her a palpable thing. Her multifaceted eyes, still the stunning sapphire blue, watched him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "They want the progeny," she rasped, her voice weaker now. "And the claim." He frowned. "Progeny, I get. You mean the kids. But the claim? What claim?" She sighed, a sound like grinding stone. "My bloodline, my position. I am an heiress, exiled, and hunted for the future of my species." She looked down at the two infants who had finally quieted, nestled against her chest, their tiny forms occasionally twitching. These are what they seek. He whistled low. Figures. Always about power, isn't it? Even out here. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. He was a crash-lands near alien sanctuary survivor, not a bodyguard for alien royalty. So what's the plan, heiress? We gonna fight 'em off with pointy sticks? Her gaze snapped back to him, sharp as a blade. You mock? You are insufferable. She used a ritual phrase then, something long and guttural that ended with a soft, purring sound. He had no idea what it meant. She then added, her voice low and commanding, We will survive. We must. My people value ritual above law, dominance over empathy. Claiming equals bonding equals survival. I was bound to these children. Now, she trailed off, her gaze dropping to his hand, which was still brushing against her scales. Now, I am vulnerable. He felt a jolt. She wasn't just talking about her physical weakness. The emotional vulnerability was new, and the heat from her, it was escalating. A flush was spreading across her scaled skin, making the bioluminescent patterns on her arms glow brighter, pulsing faintly. You're, running a fever? He asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice cracked slightly. Her lips, thin and dark, curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. It is the heat my species. When wounded, under duress, with unbonded progeny. Her words trailed off, but her meaning was clear. Her pheromones were flooding the small space. His body was reacting, a strange, insistent thrumming in his veins. He couldn't look away from her eyes. Unbonded progeny, he repeated, trying to process it. So, you're saying you need a mate? Her head tilted slightly. A claimant. To complete the bond, to ensure survival, for us all. She looked from him to the infants, then back to him, her sapphire eyes burning with an almost desperate intensity. You are here. You are male. You are available. He stared. Available? Lady, I crash-landed. I'm injured, and I'm certainly not available. He tried to scoff, but the word caught in his throat. The raw, primal need in her gaze was disarming. He was a sarcastic rogue, sure, but this was a whole new level of awkward. Her hand, previously on his arm, moved to his chest, her fingers splaying over his ripped shirt. He could feel the warmth of her palm, the slight rasp of her scales against his skin. Your scent, she murmured, her voice a low purr. It calls to me. A strange resonance. My species uses pheromones. Heat sinking. It's a pain-based threshold ritual. He felt a shiver, not of cold, but of something else entirely. The boundaries of their forced proximity were dissolving. He swallowed hard. Listen, I appreciate the compliment, but I think you've got the wrong guy. I'm just a smuggler. A very unlucky trader with a heart, sure, but not a claimant. He tried to pull back, but her grip tightened, surprisingly strong for her injured state. The infants whimpered again, as if sensing the shift in the air, the rising tension. Outside, the mercenaries were shouting, their voices closer now. They were scouting the entrance. Time was running out. The Xeno mercenaries were a persistent itch. Their voices, guttural and angry, echoed from the narrow opening of the fissure, making the already cramped space feel like a coffin. Mark could hear the scraping of their armored boots, the clinking of their gear. They were sending a scout in. He pressed himself further into the rock, his arm still trapped by the alien woman's hand. Her heat was an inferno now, making his blood thrum, his thoughts hazy. The sweet ozone scent was all-consuming. They are coming, she whispered, her voice strained. Her scales were flushed, shimmering with an intense internal bioluminescence. The infants, quiet for now, still nestled against her, their tiny forms oblivious to the escalating tension. I know, he ground out, trying to clear his head. We need a plan. Something other than whatever this heat sinking is. Her lips, dark and thin, curved into a predatory smile. It is the plan, human. For my species, claiming is bonding is survival. My body, it demands a mate to secure the line. You are here, you are strong, you are mine. Her words, simple and direct, hit him like a physical blow. His breath hitched. Hold on, a mine? He scoffed, a nervous sound. Lady, I just met you. And you're Children. I'm not anyone's property. He tried to inject his usual sarcastic rogue defiance, but it felt hollow. His body was betraying him, responding to her pheromones, to the raw, animalistic urgency radiating from her. His cock, for God's sake, was starting to harden. He cursed himself silently. God damn it, Mark, get it together. You're in a cave with a wounded alien and 2 babies, and Merc's outside. Not the time for a goddamn erection. She ignored his protest, her gaze locking onto his. It is the way, survival. I am an exiled enforcer. My family's enemies. They would see my line ended. If I do not bond, the children will suffer. I will suffer. You will suffer. She punctuated her last words with a tightening of her grip on his chest, her sharp nails digging slightly into his flesh. A ritual submission, she explained, as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. A pain-based threshold ritual. It binds us. He felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. Pain-based? What the hell does that even mean? He felt a surge of fear, mixed with a strange, undeniable thrill. Her bioluminescence pulsed, casting strange shadows on her beautiful, out-of-this-world face. It means, you will be claimed. Her other hand, surprisingly gentle despite her earlier actions, traced the outline of his jaw. He could feel the warmth of her palm, the almost imperceptible rasp of her scales. The touch sent shivers down his spine. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. Look, I'm not saying I won't help you, but there are other ways to ensure survival. We could, just fight them. He gestured vaguely towards the opening. She laughed, a low, throaty sound that was both unsettling and strangely erotic. Fight them. We are 2 against many. My heat. It is a distraction, a weakness, unless it is used. She leaned closer, her scent engulfing him completely. Her head tilted and he could feel her breath, warm and alien, on his neck. Do you fear me, human? She whispered, her voice like rough velvet. Or do you fear what we could be? He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment. He was a jaded bounty hunter. He'd seen a lot of shit. But this was new and terrifying and undeniably, incredibly arousing. His control was slipping. He could feel it. His body was reacting despite his brain screaming protests. He felt a deep, primal pull towards her, a magnetism that had nothing to do with the desert outside. She was right. The heat was a weakness, a distraction, unless it was used. He opened his eyes. Her sapphire gaze was intense, unblinking. The infant stirred, making small, soft noises. They were a reminder of the stakes. He was trapped, physically, mentally, and now, biologically. The air thrummed with unspoken need, a dangerous vibration that echoed the impending threat outside the fissure. Mark was barely holding on. Her pheromones were like a tidal wave, drowning his resistance, his rational thought. The alien woman's heat was so intense now, it was a tangible force pressing against him, radiating from every inch of her body. Her scales pulsed with an inner light, casting shifting patterns on the rough rock walls. The infants, oblivious in their slumber, were a stark contrast to the volatile energy between their adult guardians. They are breaking through, she stated, her voice low, a primal growl beneath the words. He could hear it too, the splintering of rock, the scrape of metal. The mercenaries were using some kind of cutting tool. Panic flared, cold and sharp in his chest, momentarily cutting through the haze of her pheromones. But then her eyes, those beautiful, out-of-this-world sapphire eyes, locked onto his, and the panic melted, replaced by a desperate, all-consuming heat. "The bond must be forged," she commanded, her voice suddenly stronger, resonant with ancient power. Now, she didn't ask. She demanded. Her hand, which had been resting on his jaw, slid down to his neck, her sharp claws just grazing his jugular. A silent, deadly threat. Not aggressive, not menacing, but simply a statement of intent. A claiming. I don't even know your name," he rasped, his voice raw. He was stalling, fighting the inevitable, but his body was screaming for release, for the impossible, dangerous connection she was offering. "My name is Cathara, exiled enforcer, and I choose you." Her thumb brushed the pulse point on his throat, a light, almost caressing touch that sent shivers through him. He could feel her gaze on him, a heavy, physical weight. This wasn't just about sex. This was about survival, about cultural values he barely understood, but whose implications were stark and immediate. Claiming, bonding, survival. You said, pain-based ritual, he whispered, his eyes wide. Her lips curved into that predatory yet alluring smile. A threshold to be crossed, for the bond to be complete, for the survival of my progeny and for us. She leaned closer, her scent now overpowering, every nerve ending in his body alive and screaming. He could feel the slight rasp of her scales against his cheek, the warmth radiating from her like a furnace. He felt a strange telepathic resonance, a direct connection to her raw need, a glimpse into her desperation, her primal drive to protect her young. It was overwhelming. His resistance, already crumbling, shattered completely. The sound of the cutting tool outside grew louder, closer. They had minutes, maybe less. Fuck, he breathed. His surrender choked and unwilling, yet inevitable. All right, do it. Whatever the hell it is, do it. Her smile widened, a flash of needle-sharp teeth. Her eyes blazed with triumph, and something deeper, something akin to relief. Good. Her hand on his neck tightened just perceptibly, then slid to his shoulder, pushing him back against the rock. He gasped as her other hand moved, deftly undoing the fastenings of his pants. He was surprised by the speed, the alien directness. Her fingers, strong and calloused, brushed against him, sending an electric jolt through his entire body. He was hard, throbbing, aching for her. Her touch was rough, yet deliberate, leaving no room for doubt or hesitation. She straddled him in the tight space, her weight surprisingly light despite her exotic musculature. His pelvis crushed against the hard rock, but he barely registered the discomfort. Her hot, scaled skin pressed against his, the friction sending sparks of pure sensation through him. His hands, almost without conscious thought, went to her waist, his fingers digging into the firm, alien flesh. The roar of the cutting tool outside filled the air, a fitting soundtrack to the chaotic, desperate mating ritual that was about to unfold. There was no escape, not from the mercs, not from Cathara, and not from the primal urgency that had seized them both. Her hips, surprisingly pliant yet powerfully muscled, ground against him, a deliberate friction that sent shocks of pure, unadulterated sensation through his body. The scent of her, potent and intoxicating, filled his lungs, clouding his mind until only primal instinct remained. His hands, still gripping her waist, slid lower, pulling her impossibly closer. He could feel the soft, alien skin of her inner thighs against his, the slick heat that promised release. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed, a frantic, erotic light show against the dimness of the fissure. Cathara's eyes, wide and unblinking, never left his. They were pools of raw, ancient desire, reflecting his own escalating need. The sounds of the mercenaries outside, once a terrifying threat, now faded into a dull background thrum, an insistent, rhythmic beat to their frenzied coupling. Her lips, dark and full, parted in a low growl, more pleasure than pain. She guided him, her movements confident, commanding, as if she had performed this exact ritual countless times. He gasped as she pressed down, taking him in a single, agonizingly slow thrust. The tightness, the heat, the sheer alien feel of her enveloped him, stealing his breath. Every nerve ending screamed. This was the pain-based threshold ritual she had spoken of, a searing, all-consuming pleasure pain that bonded them with an intensity he'd never known. He bit back a cry, his knuckles white as he clenched his hands, his fingers digging into the yielding flesh of her hips. God, Cathara, he choked out, her name a broken whisper on his lips. Her body moved, a slow, deliberate grind, eliciting a guttural groan from him. She watched him, her eyes burning with an almost savage triumph. "You are mine," she hissed, the words a primal declaration heavy with ownership. "Claimed." She moved faster now, a furious, desperate rhythm that drove him deeper, harder. His thrusts met hers, frantic, desperate, a silent conversation of pure, unadulterated need. Her scales, hot and slick with their combined sweat, chafed deliciously against his skin. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of sex, of pheromones, of pure, raw life. He could feel her inner muscles clenching around him, pulling him further into her depths. A new sensation bloomed, not just physical but something resonant, a psychic link, faint at first, then growing stronger, connecting their minds, their raw emotions, their desperate need for survival. He saw flashes then. Cathara's past, her exile, the desperate flight with her infants, the burning need to protect them, to ensure her bloodline, her fear, her strength, her utter profound loneliness. It hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just fucking her. He was becoming part of her. During climax, as his body convulsed, Cathara pressed her forefinger, tipped with a small, sharp claw, against the sensitive skin beneath his jaw. A brief, sharp sting, then a warmth spread, not just from the surface but from within, deep into his veins. It was her mark, her bond, a reciprocal act to her own bond mark scar, a tangible physical manifestation of the forced union. "Mine," she whispered again, her voice thick with triumph and something else, something tender and possessive, as his orgasm rocketed through him, binding him to her, to the moment, to the infant she cradled. He collapsed, utterly spent into her, his body shaking, his mind reeling from the intensity of the climax and the unexpected, overwhelming psychic connection. Outside, the cutting tool finally broke through, sending a cascade of rock and dust into the fissure. The mercenaries were in, but it was too late. The bond was forged. The aftershocks of climax rippled through him, leaving him breathless, profoundly disoriented. The psychic resonance with Cathara was still humming, a low, vibrant hum in the back of his mind, carrying echoes of her raw emotions, her desperate need. He was still half buried in her, their bodies slick with sweat and something else, something vital and alien. The air in the fissure, once thick with her pure arousal, was now imbued with a different scent, the heady musk of their completed mating, a scent of ownership, and the strange new bond between them. "God damn it," he rasped, pushing himself up, leaning on his elbows. He looked down at her. Her scales, though still flushed, had a softer glow, a subtle pulse that seemed to mirror her quieter breathing. The infants were still asleep, oblivious, but now they felt different to him somehow, connected. He felt a fierce, unexpected surge of protectiveness towards them, an instinct he hadn't known he possessed. He ran a hand over his jaw, where she had marked him. No visible wound, just a lingering warmth, a faint thrumming beneath the skin, an undeniable presence. What the hell just happened?" he murmured, his voice hoarse. Cathara shifted beneath him, her eyes, once blazing with primal fire, now held a deep, knowing calm. Her pupils had dilated, losing their sharp, predatory slits. "The bond is forged," she stated, her voice softer, yet still commanding. "The heat is sated. For now, you are mine, and I am yours." She placed a hand over his heart, her touch surprisingly gentle. He could feel the slight rasp of her palm, the warmth bleeding into him. "My people," claiming his bonding as survival. "It is not merely an act of pleasure. It is a promise." Her voice lowered, a rare vulnerability creeping in. "A necessary promise to protect the progeny, and myself." He stared at her. He was a sarcastic rogue, a reluctant mercenary. He didn't do promises, especially not with alien women he'd just met, whose species had forced a mating ritual on him at claw point. But the psychic resonance, faint as it was, confirmed her sincerity. She was a bioluminescent elite with secrets, an exiled enforcer, carrying the weight of her entire bloodline. And he, a simple human wreck survivor, had just become irrevocably tied to it. "A promise?" he scoffed, but the sound lacked conviction. "Lady, I was just trying to survive, not get married." She chuckled, a low, throaty sound that vibrated through him. "Married? Your customs are strange, human. We are bound by blood, by scent, by purpose. We are one." Her gaze intensified. The prophecy spoke of a male unlike our own kind, who would accept the bond for survival even in chaos. They said his eyes would mirror the deep vastness of the cosmos. She reached up, touching his face, her thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone. "They spoke of your eyes, A cold shock went through him. Prophecy? What prophecy? I just have blue eyes, okay? It's a common human trait. He tried to dismiss it, but the weight of her words, the absolute conviction in her tone, was impossible to ignore. You are confused, she stated, her voice firm. But that does not negate the truth. My former clan, the patriarchal elders, they hunted me for this reason. They seek to prevent the prophecy, to control the progeny, to end my line. The metallic shriek of the merc's cutting tool suddenly ceased. Footsteps thudded heavily, approaching the now open fissure. The air went cold with menace. Cathara looked at him, her gaze unwavering. They are here. They believe you are a captive. They do not know. You are claimed. A fierce primal possessiveness flared in her eyes, reflected in the psychic link. The sexual tension had been replaced by a fierce protective resolve, binding them tighter than any physical chain. The fallout was clear. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a participant in an ancient prophecy, a target, and now, a mate. The first xeno-mercenary, a hulking brute with multi-jointed limbs and a crude plasma rifle, peered into the fissure. Its compound eyes scanned the tight space, pausing on Mark, then Cathara, then the infants. A guttural snarl rippled through the opening. The female and the progeny. Surrender them, human, and your death will be swift. The words, translated by some internal comm unit on the Merc, crackled with malice. Mark felt Cathara stiffen beneath him. Her hand, which had been resting on his chest, slid to her side where a hidden blade must have been sheathed. The bond thrummed, a fierce protective energy flowing between them. He felt her rage, a cold, precise fury. He also felt his own, a surge of defiant anger. He wasn't surrendering anyone. He was a guilt-driven smuggler, now bonded to an exiled heiress. This was his problem now. Not happening, pal, Mark said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his hands. He pushed himself fully off Cathara, rising to a crouch, shielding her and the infants as best he could with his body. He was battered, bruised, but something had fundamentally shifted. He was no longer alone. He glanced back at Cathara. Her bioluminescence was flaring again, not with heat, but with a fierce, challenging glow. Her eyes were hard, fixed on the mercenary. He is claimed, she hissed, her voice cutting through the comm unit's translation, hitting the Merc with its raw, alien power. By blood, by ritual. He is mine. The Merc recoiled slightly, its compound eyes blinking. The concept of claiming was clearly something it understood on a primal level, even if it didn't fully grasp the nuance. Its snarl turned to a confused, almost hesitant sound. Another Merc, smaller but just as heavily armed, appeared behind the first. What is it, Raytrack? Just blast them. Cathara didn't wait. With a primal roar, she launched herself forward, a blur of iridescent scales and sharpened claws. Her movements were fluid, deadly, a testament to her past as an enforcer. She was a savage empress in disguise, fighting for her young, for her future, and for him. The first mercenary didn't even have time to raise its rifle. Cathara's attack was swift, brutal. She moved with an alien grace, striking with precision, aiming for weak points in its armor. Mark watched, mesmerized, as she disarmed it, the plasma rifle clattering against the rock, and then, with a horrifyingly efficient movement, dispatched it with her bare claws. The sound of rending flesh and snapping bone filled the fissure. Holy shit, Mark breathed, his eyes wide. He knew she was a warrior, but he hadn't seen her in action. The second mercenary hesitated, clearly unnerved by the ferocity of her attack. Mark seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, grabbing the fallen plasma rifle. It was heavy, awkward in his hands, but he'd handled worse. Your move, ugly, he snarled, bringing the weapon up. The Merc hesitated for a split second, its decision to fire delayed by Cathara's earlier declaration and his own sudden aggression. That was all Mark needed. He squeezed the trigger. The plasma blast erupted, bright and searing, hitting the Merc squarely in its chest plate. It shrieked, stumbling back, its armor smoking. Cathara, already moving, used the distraction. She leapt onto the wounded mercenary, her movements a blur, finishing it with swift, brutal efficiency. The fighting was over in moments. 2 Mercs down. The fissure was silent again, save for Cathara's ragged breathing and the faint whimpering sounds of the infants behind her. Cathara turned, her eyes still blazing, and looked at Mark. Her face was streaked with alien blood, but her stance was triumphant. "They thought me weak," she hissed, her voice laced with contempt. "They were wrong. We are not easily broken, human. Now, we find a way out." The bond, forged in desperation, now hammered in triumph, made them a formidable pair. They had fought, and they had won. For now. The stench of ozone and scorched alien flesh hung heavy in the air, mixing with Cathara's lingering pheromones. Mark still tasted ash on his tongue. They had survived the immediate confrontation, but they weren't out of the magnetic desert relics yet. Cathara moved with a renewed purpose, no longer stumbling. The bond, the shared fight, had revitalized her. She was formidable, a savage empress now fully unleashed. "More will come," she stated, her gaze sweeping the narrow fissure. "They will not abandon the progeny, or me." She glanced at him, her multifaceted eyes sharp. "Or you. You are now complicit, marked." He touched his jaw, feeling the subtle warmth of her claim. Yeah, I got it. Property of the exiled heiress. Lovely." His sarcasm was back, a defense mechanism against the sheer insanity of his situation. But it felt different now, tinged with a grudging respect. "So, where to, boss?" He gestured with the captured plasma rifle. It was heavy, but a damn sight better than nothing. Cathara moved to the now open hole the mercs had cut. She peered out, her senses scanning the desolate landscape. "The Elders will send a larger force. We must reach the ancient transport nexus. It lies beyond the shifting dunes." He whistled. The shifting dunes? That's suicide. Magnetic storms, sand slicks, cannibalistic desert crawlers. My old maps listed as impassable. She turned, her eyes fixed on him. "Your maps are for the weak. I am an enforcer. I know these lands. And my purpose. Claiming is bonding is survival. We are bonded. Therefore, we survive." Her voice was commanding, but there was a new undercurrent of something. Shared burden. A subtle, almost imperceptible softening. The bond had changed her too. It wasn't just about her survival anymore, it was about theirs. "Right. Bonded. Got it," he muttered, still grappling with the sheer enormity of that. He was a simple wreck survivor, now facing a perilous journey with an alien queen and her royal infants. He felt a weird, protective urge to lift one of the infants himself, to ease her burden, but he held back. Too soon. "My people believe that sexual victory proves worth," she continued, her voice lower now, almost a murmur, as if sharing a secret. "You fought well. You claimed your kill. You are worthy." He blinked. Was that a compliment? From her? Thanks. You weren't so bad yourself. Kind of terrifying, actually. He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. "So this nexus, is it safe?" She shook her head. "No, it is. A ritual-ringed moon. An ancient place. Only those who are truly bonded can enter the inner sanctum. It is where my line can be made safe, where the prophecy may be fulfilled." Prophecy again. His destiny apparently was to be a cosmic baby daddy. Great. More rituals. Just what I needed. "You guys really like your rituals, don't you?" he grumbled. "It is our strength," she retorted, a hint of defiance in her tone. "Our survival, unlike your disorganized chaos." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, it's organized. Just not in a way you'd understand. We call it winging it." She didn't smile, but a flicker of amusement touched her eyes. "Primitive." She then took a deep breath, her nostrils flaring. "We must move. The scent of battle. It will draw more." She looked at him, her gaze lingering. "You are bound. You are ours. We will face this, together." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a declaration. He might be a smart-ass scavenger, but for the first time in a long time he didn't feel completely lost. He had a purpose. A dangerous, beautiful, demanding purpose. He had a queen, 2 alien infants, and a whole lot of xeno-mercenaries hunting them across a magnetic desert. And somehow, against all odds, he felt like he might actually survive this. He even managed a crooked smile. "All right, Cathara. Lead the way. But if we run into any more heat sinking, you're on your own, got it?" He knew it was a lie the moment the words left his lips. The bond was already too deep. Cathara moved through the treacherous magnetic dunes with an unsettling familiarity, her body seemingly attuned to the shifting sands and the faint hum of the planetary magnetic field. Mark followed, the heavy plasma rifle feeling more and more like an extension of his own arm. He was still reeling from the events in the fissure, the sudden violent bond, the raw, visceral sex, and the undeniable shift in his perception of Cathara and, by extension, the infants. His emotional landscape had fractured and reformed, leaving him with a strange mix of resentment, primal protectiveness, and a dark, undeniable possessiveness. He was a jaded bounty hunter, but this was a whole new level of entanglement. "We must conserve water," Cathara stated, her voice clipped. "The Nexus is still days away, and the storms will come." She glanced back at him, her eyes flicking to the infants, still bundled securely against her. "Your water pack. Share it." He sighed, but didn't argue. Yeah, Queen. Anything else I can do for my new, family?" His sarcasm was still there, but it was softer now, less a shield and more a way to manage the absurd reality. She tilted her head, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as curiosity. "Family? Is that what your species calls those who are bonded by ritual and purpose?" He almost choked on his own spit. "Something like that. Usually there's, a wedding, rings, less forced sex in a rock fissure with mercs trying to kill us." She considered this, her brow furrowed. "The ritual is the bond. The purpose is the progeny. The survival is the reward. This is clearer." He shook his head, a wry grin on his face. "Clear as mud, Cathara. Clear as mud." A sudden jolt. The sand beneath their feet began to vibrate with a low rumble. Not the mercs this time. Something else. Cathara stopped dead, her bioluminescent patterns flaring brightly, then dimming to a faint pulse. A silent warning. "Magnetic storm," she whispered, her voice tight. "A strong one. We must find shelter now." The sky, previously a harsh red, was darkening rapidly, streaks of lightning arcing across the horizon, crackling with raw energy. The magnetic fields of the desert were being thrown into chaos. Mark cursed under his breath. No cover in sight, just more sand. His eyes swept the horizon, desperate. He was a smart-ass scavenger, and this was an impossible situation. "There," Cathara pointed with a clawed finger towards a distant, jagged peak, barely visible through the swirling dust. A collapsed structure, ancient, perhaps a temporary refuge. They ran, or rather, struggled, through the rapidly deteriorating visibility. The wind whipped sand into their faces, stinging their exposed skin. Mark kept a hand on Cathara's back, guiding her, protecting her, a silent agreement forged in the crucible of their bond. He could feel the familiar weight of the infants on her, a constant reminder of their shared purpose. The storm hit them with full force just as they reached the skeletal remains of the ancient structure, a crumbling archway of black magnetic stone. They scrambled inside, finding little more than a hollowed-out cavity, barely large enough for them both to huddle in. The wind howled, a banshee shriek, and the air crackled with static electricity. "God damn," Mark breathed, his body aching, his throat raw from the sand. He leaned back against the rough stone, pulling Cathara closer, shielding her as best he could from the elements. Her body was rigid with tension, but she didn't pull away. The infants whimpered, disturbed by the storm's fury. Cathara shushed them, her voice a low, soothing purr, alien yet comforting. She looked up at Mark, her sapphire eyes reflecting the lightning flashes outside. "We are bound," she repeated, her voice solemn. "This storm, it tests our resolve, our union." He didn't answer immediately. He just watched her, the strange, complicated woman he was now tied to. He was a wreck survivor. He knew about storms. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this storm, internal and external, was just beginning. But for the first time, he wasn't facing it alone. The magnetic storm raged outside their meager shelter, the very air vibrating with raw energy, making Mark's teeth ache. Inside the cramped, crumbling structure, the silence between them was thick, charged. Cathara held the infants close, her eyes scanning the entrance, vigilant despite the exhaustion etched on her beautiful, out-of-this-world face. The subtle thrum of her bond mark on his jaw was a constant reminder of their irrevocable connection. "How long will this last?" he asked, his voice low, breaking the silence. Cathara shrugged, a fluid, alien movement. "Days. Perhaps a week. The magnetic currents are unpredictable. A week." Trapped in a hole in the ground with an alien queen he was now bonded to, and her 2 infants. He was a cynical scavenger, but even he could appreciate the irony. He glanced at the plasma rifle, propped against the wall. At least they had a weapon. He had a weapon. They had a weapon. The collective pronoun was still weird. "We will share what provisions remain," she stated, her gaze intense. "It is the way of the bonded." She rummaged in a small, concealed pouch on her belt, pulling out a couple of nutrient bars, flat and metallic, that smelled faintly of ozone. "They are sustenance for you too." He took one, examining it. "Looks like a doorstop. Tastes like one too, probably." He took a bite, forcing himself to chew. It was bland, chalky. "So, about this prophecy," he ventured, trying to change the subject, to understand the intricate web he'd stumbled into. "The one about the guy with the ocean eyes. You really think that's me?" Cathara watched him, her eyes unblinking. "The prophecy of the Sky Strider speaks of a male, unlike our kind, whose eyes reflect the void, who would forge a bond in fire and protect the progeny of the exiled empress. It ensures survival, and the continuation of the true line against the patriarchal elders who sought to extinguish it." She paused, her gaze direct, unwavering. "Your eyes, Mark. They are the color of the deep beyond. And you have accepted the bond. You are the Sky Strider." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. All right, Sky Strider. Sounds like a bad comic book hero. So these patriarchal elders, they're the ones who sent the mercs?" "Yes. They fear the prophecy. They seek to prevent a new era where dominance is balanced by union. They seek only power through lineage control." She shifted, pulling the infants closer, her eyes momentarily clouded with a deep maternal protectiveness that transcended species. He felt it too, through the bond, a fierce surge of shared purpose. He, a guy who had literally crashed into this, was now part of something ancient, something sacred. He was a reluctant mercenary, but the infants, they were innocent. And Cathara, for all her commanding presence, was deeply vulnerable beneath the scales. "So we're not just running away," he mused. "We're making a statement." She nodded, a subtle curve to her lips. "Exactly. And you, Mark Kovich, are the instrument of that statement." She reached out, her clawed finger tracing the faint, pulsing mark on his jaw. "The bond is strong. It binds us emotionally as well as physically. Do you feel it?" He felt the warmth under her finger and the deeper thrumming beneath his skin. He did feel it. An ache, a connection, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. It was terrifying and strangely comforting. "Yeah," he admitted, his voice rough. "Yeah, I feel it. It's a lot." He looked at her, truly looked at her, not just as a means to survive, but as the woman now irrevocably tied to him. The forced intimacy, the danger, the ritual, it had all culminated in this. A bizarre, undeniable unity. He was still himself, but also changed, bound. A knot of something undefinable tightened in his chest. It wasn't love yet, not in the human sense, but it was certainly a potent, dangerous, and utterly compelling form of something else. The magnetic storm began to recede, the howls of the wind gradually replaced by the low hum of the desert's returning calm. Mark felt a strange mixture of relief and apprehension. The forced proximity and the shared desperation of the past days had deepened the bond, making it an almost constant, palpable thrum beneath his skin. Cathara, too, seemed subtly changed. Her commanding tone remained, but it was now threaded with an intimacy that was both unsettling and alluring. She was still a cocky, dominant warrior, but the vulnerable undercurrent was undeniable. "The Nexus is still 2 days' journey," Cathara announced, her voice echoing in the now quieter shelter. "We must be swift. The elders will have sent their strongest by now. Xeno mercenaries are just the first wave." He nodded, checking the charge on the plasma rifle. "Right, strongest. Of course. Just my luck." His sarcasm was automatic, but he found himself meeting her gaze, a shared understanding passing between them. He was a simple human, but he was prepared to face whatever they threw at them. He was bonded. "You are ready," she stated, her eyes assessing him. It wasn't a question. It was an affirmation. He felt a surge of pride, unexpected and potent. "As I'll ever be, Cathara." He watched her cradle the infants, their small forms nestled safely against her. He felt the protective instinct surge again, stronger than before. This was his family now, in the strangest, most dangerous way possible. "When we reach the Nexus, what then?" he asked. "More rituals? More pain-based threshold things?" He tried to keep his tone light, but there was an edge of genuine curiosity. She looked at him, a rare, softer expression on her beautiful, out-of-this-world face. "The Nexus is a sacred space, a ritual-ringed moon. It is where our ancient blood cult performed the binding of the progeny. It is where the Sky Strider will confirm his claim before the ancestral spirits." His heart gave a hard thump. "Confirm my claim? So, like publicly?" She nodded. "Publicly. It will solidify our union, and mark the beginning of a new era for my line." She paused, then added, her voice lower, more personal. "It is also where I will truly claim you. Before all, a public spectacle, as your customs might describe it. A public spectacle." Great. He could already picture it. Mark Kodiak Kovich, the reluctant space daddy paraded before a crowd of alien royalty. He almost laughed. He'd seen a lot of things in his life as a guilt-driven smuggler, but this was definitely going to take the cake. "So no getting out of this, then?" he asked, a faint smile on his lips. She shook her head, her eyes burning with an intense, possessive light. "No, you are claimed, and I will not let you go." He felt the words, not just hear them. They resonated deep within him, through the bond. It wasn't a threat anymore, it was a promise. A terrifying, exhilarating promise of forever. He reached out, his hand covering hers where she held one of the infants. Her scales were warm beneath his palm. He looked down at the tiny alien creature, then back at Cathara. Her fierce loyalty, her unwavering protectiveness, her raw power. It was all part of the package, and he, somehow, inexplicably, wouldn't have it any other way. "All right, Cathara," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "Let's get to your Nexus, and let's show those elders exactly what happens when you mess with a Sky Strider and his queen." He meant it. The strange, dangerous, erotic journey had turned him from a lone wolf into something entirely new. He was bound, and he was ready to fight for his claim, his family, his future.